Hey folks, just wanted to pop in here real quick before the episode starts. Since the Andalite Chronicles is a bit longer than our books that we normally read, I'm going to divide the episode into two parts. So this part one you're listening to today is released today, and then next week you will get part two. So you don't have to wait 2 weeks in between parts. After part two, it will be 2 weeks, and then the next episode will come out. So we'll be back on our regular schedule after part two. So I hope that's not confusing for anybody. I hope you all enjoy it, and I hope it's not quite so much as like an interruption between like one longer book and the two episodes. So enjoy the episode. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Kacey.
And I'm Gianni.
I never finished reading the Animorphs books as a kid, and I still haven't as an adult.
And I've never read them.
We can't tell you where we live.
But we can tell you that we want to revisit these books as adults and dive into what we would keep or change if we were to put it on TV.
Two friends, 50-something books. Welcome to Morphin Buddies.
And then the music kicks in, and then people are just so ready.
Hey everybody, welcome to our next episode of Morphin Buddies with me, your host, Kacey Cisnowski, and across my screen we've got Gianni DeMaia.
What's up?
What's up?
Ready to Andalite Chronicle this
podcast. This book.
I was literally just saying to you before we started recording, but I'll just say it to the people now.
Yeah.
I did read this book like a week and a half ago, so listen, if I miss some things, I am sorry.
Also this book is kind of a chunky boy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, chunky comparatively to the fact that
rest
we've
of
been
the
reading
books.
like 100-page books. Yeah, we've been like spoiled rotten on like, this is a breed.
Yeah.
Like even some of the ones that were like, this is a little long in the tooth. It's like it's still 100 some odd pages.
Yeah, it's like 130 pages. Really not that long.
Yeah, this I was reminded of, like, oh, real books.
Real
right?
books. Yeah, with
right,
words
right.
and stuff.
People read.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not your average Colleen Hoover, shall we say.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I guess that was a real book that I also read.
So we're going to...
If you can call that a real book.
I gotta send you.
Sorry.
I just watched a deep dive on that book. I gotta send it to you because I think you'll appreciate it.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh my god,
it's not good.
I sent like there's like one of the book clubs that I'm in. I'm in 3 book clubs, and one of them, they didn't want to read it, but they wanted to know about it, and I was like, I could just spoil the whole thing for you guys, and they were like, yeah, let's do it. So it's literally just voice memos. I think I sent like 30 minutes worth of voice memos just saying like, okay, and then this, and then this, and then this. So it's basically exactly what I do on this podcast, but imagine that for a Colleen Hoover book, and chaos ensued.
Johnny, you're a saint for doing that. You're the best.
I was doing the Lord's work as I was reading about Lily Bloom, who owns, you guessed it, a flower shop.
And apparently her middle name is Blossom. Lily Blossom Bloom, who owns a flower shop. Can you get more on the nose?
Dude, if that's not good enough, there's a whole... They actually do, in the book, at one point, they do a... He's right behind me, isn't he?
No!
They absolutely do. It rocks, actually. It fucks. It's so funny.
Hate it. Okay, well, we're going to start this off with a little Colleen Hoover, and... we got a couple more emails, Mr. Gianni.
We did.
So, So technically, we got 4 emails. 2 of them are a little too long to read on the podcast, but they know who they are. Thank you for sending those. We read them.
I did read the long ones. They were great, and thank you so much. I don't know. I don't remember the name of the person,
Ryan.
but. Ryan, thank you so much for reaching out to the show.
Yeah.
And I loved a lot of your ideas. Just to shout out part of the email.
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Because most of it was just breaking down our suggested changes or whatever
book
for
by
the
book.
adaptation. And there was great feedback on all of the stuff. There was a couple of things that he even threw in as like suggested lines. Sorry, I'm just assuming Ryan's a he, but there were suggested lines that Ryan had thrown in that I also thought, oh yeah, that's like pitch perfect. the big one that Ryan was talking about was obviously our biggest suggested change or whatever. And I wanted to shout it out because Ryan had the exact feedback that I was looking for, which he was like, hey, now I'm blanking on the freaking alien's name. The body of Visser 3. Alaran?
Alaran, right? Yeah, Alaran.
Yes. So he was like, hey, Alaran is important, so Alaran does have to live. And I was like, great, that's all you need to say. And Ryan was also very respectful to protect our spoiler interests as well.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan. That was really, really sweet.
We appreciate you. So, if you want to keep sending us emails, Ryan, about your opinions, I will absolutely forward them to Gianni. And thank you for those. So we've got an email from Cody. This one's also a little bit long, so I'm just going to shorten it, just kind of do bullet points. Cool. Cody says they're enjoying the heck out of our podcast. Thanks, Cody.
Thanks, Cody.
They said they did a full reread of the books last year when they were stuck at home after a knee surgery. And they said, holy buckets, I hope you keep the podcast going because the evolution of the story, characters, motivations, emotional weight of it all, it just gets better and better and heavier. And, Gianni, there's even hope for Jake's stupid ass.
No way. Oh, my God.
They said there's hope. There's hope.
Cody, thank you so much. I hope your knee is feeling much better.
Yes.
But there's also far worse ways to spend your time than reading all the Animorphs books, as we're discovering as well. So I'm glad that that has inspired you at least to jump on our journey in tandem with your previous year's journey. So that's wonderful. But again, I hope your knee is feeling better. But that is promising. I will not hold my breath on the Jake.
There's hope.
Stuff.
There's hope, Gianni.
Yeah, this was the best Jake book in my opinion. This one, because
he's not. I was like, where was he? Oh, he wasn't in it. So that was from Cody, and then Ryan also sent another email, which when we were talking about in a previous episode, where we're like, oh, if Axe can take different human morphs and mush them together, can we do that with different animals? Ryan said, look, I can't confirm or deny anything like that might happen down the line. And then they went into a whole long description, which made me feel like a big dumb idiot, because they're like, oh, Axe took from human to human to human. You know, humans mate with humans and then they have babies. And that's normal, but like hawks and like dolphins can't mate and have babies, so they can't share DNA.
Right. That makes sense.
So that's why it would be more difficult. And I was like, wow, I'm a big dumb idiot for not thinking about that.
No, that's really smart. No, that makes perfect sense. And I hope they at the very least just to address it at some point.
Yeah, right.
Because I hope like someone like a big dumb idiot like me, like a Marco, would have to just be like, hey, why can't we have fins when we also are a snake?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Something stupid, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Why can't I fly like a lion? And then
sick.
for someone, and then then you just have someone just jump in and be like, hey, that makes no sense for exactly the reasons that Ryan just said.
Yeah. So thank you also for that, Ryan, for putting those pieces together for us, because Gianni and I, we don't know what sex is. That's not a real thing. It's a myth.
Sorry, it's sex, you said?
Yeah. Have you ever heard of it?
No. What?
I'm told it happens, but it's like a myth. I don't know.
That's not real.
It's sus.
Never heard of it, actually.
Sex, never heard of her. Don't know her.
Right.
Don't know her.
Right.
Anyway, dumb joke. Anyway, we are opening up on the Andalite Chronicles. Gianni, did your romance sense get tingled a little bit in this?
I did. I did get a little tingle. It answered the question almost immediately out the gate that I asked last time we recorded, which was, how long do you think it would take for one of us to try to fucking Andalite? And the answer was almost immediately.
Immediately.
She was hot for him immediately.
From the get-go. And then the book made sure to be like, she's 18. She's 18.
Yeah.
She's 18.
Yeah, don't worry.
Like 12 times.
Yeah.
She's like, I definitely feel 18.
I don't remember
18.
them ever saying Elfangor's age, so I was like, whatever.
That's true, but I don't think he's 12.
No, I got the impression he was a fair bit older.
Like, at least 20.
But who knows? Maybe like one Andalite ear is like 18 human years,
Could be. We did get a lot of Andalite lore in this one, which was fun.
Understatement of the century. We got a ton of it. We got a lot of twists that I think are super vital for the series. We had the return of the frickin' Elemist, which I did not see coming. I mean, there was so much in this book, and it's funny because it really is only like a 300-page book, but there is so much in this book, particularly in like the final third, where it's just like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to process this information.
Yeah.
It was wild.
Yeah. A lot of crazy stuff happens in this. I enjoy that. I would say if I had to pick between the 3 books that were mushed into one, I would probably pick the second one as my favorite. Just because I like angst. I'm a little angsty lady at heart. I grew up during the scene and emo kids, and they were my friends while I was doing theater in high school.
Right.
And they just understood me the best, and I just like angsty stuff.
Yeah, this was like 3 books in one. Yeah, it even splits up into like part 1, part 2, part 3.
Part 3.
Oh, I meent to say that actually that just jogged my memory, me just saying that in that whatever voice. I wanted to shout out because I had said this on another episode before, I think when we were doing Megamorphs, that I was like, let me check out the audio or whatever. And I did the audiobook for this one.
Ooh.
And I really wanted to shout out the reader because this guy rocked. Absolutely cooked. The reader's name, and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, but MacLeod Andrews narrates this book on Audible. Could not recommend higher, everybody. It is a great reader. He's got little voices that he does. It really keeps the characters in perspective. I think that his villains are really chilling. I think that his sound effects are... He goes for it, which I think not everybody can really get away with. This was a wonderful, wonderful reader, and I think there's like a very emotional like third act here that I actually liked better just in the way he performed it than like
I wondered about that too
otherwise.
When I was reading it on the page. I was like, this would be really powerful, like hearing the tone of the person's voice as
it was
this
really
interaction was
emotive.
happening.
Yeah, it was really wonderful. So if you have not checked out the audio version of this book in particular, I would highly recommend it because I think the reader did a fantastic job. And Mr. Andrews, if you have any interest in coming on the podcast,
oh my
the door's
God,
please.
Please.
Door's always open.
Yes.
Apparently MacLeod does other books in the series as well. I was looking through his little IMDb or whatever, so I think I'm going to just check out anytime he's the reader. I think I'm just going to check out the audio because it was really fabulous. It really was.
Oh, good. Well, kudos to MacLeod, you said?
Yeah, I don't know if it's like MacLeod. It's MacLeod.
Thank you so much for your wonderful reading, Mr. Andrews.
Yes, you can read. you read.
If only to read. So anyway, all right. Well, we'll Gianni, what were your feelings just overall for this book?
Yeah, so I think I would agree with you that the second chunk of this is probably it's the most action-packed book that we've gotten in the series, just by and large. Everything about this book is just like the most Animorphs.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I think it probably has the fewest amount of morphs.
Yeah, it really does. It's only like one or two.
But it is the most science fiction heavy book in the series by a wide margin, and they set that tone very early on. I think that were I to like kind of pinpoint each of these like 3 acts, so to speak, and they all stack on each other very well. And so it makes sense why they decided to release this all as one book instead of 3, like a 3-parter spinoff. I think that the first part of this is really just a typical like cadet in training thrown into the throes of war, trying to figure it out as he goes. The second part is pure chaos and anarchy. We're behind enemy lines and we got to get out. And then the third part is Banana Land, space opera. Very, very somber, very existential.
Like a lot.
It's where all of the themes really come together, I think, beautifully, but they come together at the cost of a very convoluted narrative. And so I'm curious to talk with you about the third part in particular, because I go back and forth in questioning between whether or not I liked this like third section, because I think the benefits of it are so good and strong for the series. But it does like do my head in, and it was too. Very interesting as well going on Reddit and seeing like how other people kind of were talking about this. There was like a Reddit post that kind of immediately popped up when I was like just searching about this book, and it was basically the original poster was like, hey, I think I didn't get this, like, can someone explain to me what the hell happened? And a lot of really interesting comments on that particular Reddit thread, basically just people talking about their sort of like thematic takeaways, the cost of running from war, basically like coming back into the fight and how that's actually more of a tragedy than it would have been in like another sort of anti-war picture. And I was like, there's some really, really interesting perspectives on there from those Redditors, and I think that they were wonderful, but I question whether or not the narrative could have had that same impact with a much more concise narrative perspective, because this was demonstrably convoluted. Like anything that you thought you understood about the time matrix is like all of a sudden in the third part it's like, wait.
It was a little brain bending. I would agree with you on that. It did feel very much like timey-wimey, this is very complex and you're not going to understand it, but just kind of go with it type of feel, which is fun. But like when you start trying to like break things down and trying to make sense of it and really like get into the details of like why, how, how could this happen? Sometimes like with stories like this, it can fall apart a little bit. I don't necessarily feel like it fell apart, but I did think there was a plot line at the very end, which I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then like the more I thought about it and the more I let it marinate, I was like, I don't know if I actually like that little bit at the end. As for like the future of the story and like where the plot is going to go, I'm not sure I really enjoyed that. Like the more I think about it, I mean, who knows? It could be something super relevant coming. I'm sure it will be at some point later on in the books.
That's the thing. They're so consequential at the end that it's like there's no way this doesn't come back. I just don't know how, and I don't know what they do with it. But I totally agree.
And we know where the time matrix is. So. Yeah. Which is really interesting. That's like, it's just there where everything started in the first place. So, So I mean, like, we can kind of get more into the nitty gritty as we go through these books. Not sure how long this episode may be. It may be one super long episode, or I may break it up into 2 smaller ones. We'll see.
No, it's gonna be wicked short because I remember like bullet point things, and I don't remember any of the nuance.
Listen, Gianni, that's why you gotta take notes. Yeah, you gotta take 4 pages of notes on your phone.
Yeah, no, I don't do that no more. Those are for the olden days. No, I always think about, what was that? It was like one of the first comments we ever got or whatever on the show, and it was the person who was saying, yeah, like, you guys like misremember things all the time.
Oh, you go for low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, I don't find it endearing, and I was like, yeah, it's kind of fair. Like,
true.
But I'm not I'm not a supercomputer, you know. This is we like to think of this podcast as more so just being like, hey, what if Marco grew up, split into two people named Kacey and Gianni, and then they just tried to remember everything that happened.
Best of the best.
That's kind of what we go for. You know what I mean? So
yeah. All right.
We're just all here to have a good time.
Yeah, we're having a good time and dive into what we remember and hopefully improve upon the source material. So, anyway, we are going to start Andalite Chronicles, Book 1, Elfangor's Journey. Ooh.
Yeah, so he was, I would like to just say, a surprisingly interesting narrator for me personally. Mm-hmm. And I saw some criticization online of Elfangor as a narrator, and I was curious your thought, because the points online were essentially like Elfangor either works for you or he doesn't, because they kind of saw him as a bland sort of hero, but I disagree.
Yeah.
I found Elfangor to be very compelling. I think, especially in the context of everything that happens to him in this book, it was particularly enlightening to have this person sort of tragically thrown into their own heroic circumstances. Yeah. And I think that most of the narration comes from a sort of a very retrospective understanding of the cost that it sort of took to get there. And I found that to be very somber and melancholic in a very positive way. Yeah. In a way that I think the other narrators of the series, though they do have that kind of retrospect perspective that they spin on these tales, it does have this sense of like YA youthful optimism.
Sure.
Where that this didn't really feel like that at all. No. It felt like a much more mature book. And I think that started in the narration. But I was curious your thoughts.
No, I totally agree. I feel like Elfangor, I was really on this journey with him. I liked him as a character. He even kind of sort of made some jokes that like Axe has made in previous books, where that was kind of nice to see that little parallel of like, oh, he is his older brother, you know?
Right.
I did find him compelling. I liked the amount of emotion that was in this book. That, like, you know, it's also the thing of, you know, these hardened warriors come home and they're just stoic and they don't talk about things, and that's just the way that things are. And then we really go on a journey with this huge amount of, like, emotional life that Elfangor went on. And I think there's a point where it mentions that, like, Andalites don't really like understand emotions all that well, and for Elfangor to kind of go on this journey of feeling all of these emotions and trying to understand where they're coming from or what they're doing there, and just accepting it and still continuing on, I think that's really wonderful, because we're coming from we're coming from a society where it doesn't seem like they're very emotional. It seems like they're very much like raised in like a soldiery way of like, this is your job, this is your duty, and you do it, and that's it. So it was really nice to go on this emotional journey and not necessarily have him. I mean, he kind of broke down and quit at one point, but at the same time later on, he just kind of accepts that and then says, okay, it's time for me to face my responsibilities and to continue my journey. I really enjoyed that. I thought you could see a whole character arc throughout the 3 books, how he grows and how he actually becomes this warrior, even though reluctantly he didn't want to be the warrior.
Right.
And you can see that change and that acceptance. And I thought that was really wonderful storytelling, especially for like children that are reading this book. I thought that was great.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a surprisingly very human story, and which is obviously surprising because of how foreign the protagonist just is inherently. But yeah, I was interested in that. But so the book begins, and Elfangor is basically already talking in retrospect. He's kind of collecting a I say audible,
thought diary,
because he's telepathic thought. Yeah, thought diary of his experiences. He's just been shot down, so it basically begins like where Invasion, the very first Animorphs book, begins, but from Elfangor's perspective, and he's talking about how he basically knows it's the end, and is trying to collect his thoughts over kind of what led to this particular experience. And then we jump very quickly back in time to
21 years earlier. That's what it says.
Yeah, so and this is presumably, I guess, like because it doesn't specify exactly, at least not to my recollection, how long he had kind of been training, but obviously
he's young.
This is the tail sort of end. Yeah, he's very much an up and coming. They talk very quickly after this about like, oh my god, this is our first time like going into like the field, like doing actual like field work or whatever. But he is kind of going through basic training.
We meet Arbron, his buddy.
Tail fighting. Yeah. I loved Arbron, by the way. I did too. This is probably one of my favorite supporting characters that we've introduced. It was really, really cool. To have, they had this kind of rivalry that was also very respectful of each other. I think beyond their like initial meeting, because in their initial introduction to each other, it seems very passive aggressive, and you kind of get the impression that this is going to be more of an antagonistic relationship. But it's much more of just like a reluctant friendship between these two, and I thought that was very interesting and nuanced, and it brought both of them to some pretty mature places pretty quick, where they had to very much respect each other and their different skill sets in order to complement each other on this mission. But Elfangor is kind of going through basic training. We get to see glimpses of some tail fighting techniques in him with his instructor. And Elfangor has promise, of course, but he's still not quite at the caliber to be able to just
be a warrior
go out and start fighting, which is pretty much his dream in the way that he is detailing it. As you had said, we meet Arbron, and the two very quickly get called up to the bridge to basically come face to face with. I'm completely blanking on the character's name, but there is a character who is like a very significant, I guess, prince or higher up in their societal structure, who tells them that they are going to go on a field mission. There's a Skritna ship. Actually, I believe it was a couple of ships, but there's a Skritna ship that has some sort of
like device.
Now I'm blanking on the word that I want to use. That has something on it. Some sort of scavenge or salvage that they're like,
we're pretty sure it's Andalite technology, so you should go on the ship and steal it back. We get a lot of lore dump on the Andalites. We learn that they have a controlled population, and they are allowed to have more children now because they're at war. They've been at war with the Yeerks for about 5 years. So Elf is just like, oh, I hope I get a little baby brother. I haven't seen my family in a long time, but hopefully I'll get a brother, which I thought was kind of cute.
Yeah, especially considering, what we know. Just one of those.
So yeah, like you were saying, there's a Skritna ship, which they're like scavengers. They're like the garbage collectors. They just kind of collect lots of weird things across the universe, and the Andalites are like, we think we got a piece of Andalite technology on that ship, and we're going to need to check it out. So you guys have to go board the ship, and since you two want to be warriors, go ahead. This is your first big job. And they're like, ooh, nervous. So they go out there, they knock out the Skritna engines. So Skritna are like an alien species that have two forms. First is the Skrit, and apparently they have the Skrit. And apparently
for the audio listeners, if you don't know, I'm only laughing because the accompanying hand gesture from Kacey on the Skrit is cracking me up. Just a little index finger just wiggling.
Yeah, just wiggling my index finger up and down to the sky and to the side. That's the little Skrit. That's the Skrit. Also, this is not how the Skrit is described in the book at all. In the book, it says they have 14 legs with 6 antennas. I imagined the Skrit looking like. Do you remember Space Ghost Coast to Coast on Cartoon Network?
I don't think I do.
Oh my
I'll look it
god!
up.
Okay, Space Ghost Coast to Coast. I think that's what it was called. It was like a short that aired late night on Cartoon Network. It was a guy that looked like Batman.
I absolutely remember this. Yes.
Yes.
I do, yeah.
The praying mantis from that show.
Yes.
That's what I imagined the Skrit looked like.
That's a great
Brack?
visual
No,
representation.
Brack was the one I liked. Brack was the cat with the red face.
No.
I loved Brack. I don't remember what the green guy was named. But that's what I imagined the Skrit look like.
That's
so
the
that's
Skrit.
what they are in my brain.
Love it.
And then the Skrit make a cocoon. They turn into the Na, which is like 4 long legs, and they come from a dead Skrit.
Yeah,
The end.
they're named they're named because you look at them, you go, oh nah,
Skrit, nah.
oh nah.
Anyway, yeah. So they find humans on this ship, and they're like, "What
Yeah.
the heck, humans? Ew."
There's two of them in particular.
Two of them.
And
yeah.
obviously we get
a woman and a man.
We get the description of them from Elfangor's eyes, and it's very similar to how Axe reacted to the alien species when he first encountered them as well. But there's Lauren, or Lauren. I don't know because
I think it's Lauren.
It's not spelled like a typical Lauren. So
I think, yeah, it isn't. Which I noticed that
I
also.
think they pronounced it Lauren. And
yeah, I
then
think it's Lauren.
there is a younger man named Hedrick Chapman.
Chapman,
Who grows up to be the vice principal of the fucking...
What the hell?
So
what is he like 12 in this? Or it's like
they never? I don't know if they ever explicitly state, but yeah, he's kind of just like a young little shit.
Yeah.
What's interesting about this, and there was some divisive reactions to this on the Reddit as well. I'm curious your opinions. So there was someone on Reddit who was complaining that the Chapman that we get in this book is so demonstrably different from the Chapman that we understand from book 2.
Yep, that was my first thought also.
That it feels like it kind of deprived that character of the characterization that book had already set out for him. And while I do agree to this point, the prevailing argument against this was that it actually gave some pretty interesting nuance in the sense that the Chapman that we know as an older Chapman was had clearly grown out of a lot of this sort of immature characteristics of this former Chapman.
Sure.
To the point where he now cared about his family. But it was also a compliment in the sense of saying that the character was a good exploration of the selfishness that comes, in the face of war, where all of a sudden his actual family is at risk. So then all of a sudden now I can fight for the quote unquote the right things now that it's my life that's in genuine peril as opposed to sort of an abstract something outside of me. And I think those are interesting points. However, I think I agree more with the original commenter's criticism of it because we're not talking about someone who is like just sort of bratty. We're talking about a legitimate antagonist to a lot of different circumstances.
For sure.
In a sense that Chapman is pretty much exclusively the reason that Mr. 3 gets Alarin at all. So I don't. We're not talking about someone who is just who just had poor opinions that hadn't expanded their worldview yet. We're talking about somebody who, in the face of actual legitimate fascist alien species, decided they seem to have the right idea and then benefited them to such a dramatic degree that you actually set the cause of this war back several decades.
Yeah, and
that's
also,
the type of person we're talking about.
Yeah, it felt so one note. And I thought it would be better, like, if he was really scared and tried to be brave and, like, tried to do something and it was, like, a mistake, or if he if he did something more out of cowardice than like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm just doing this because I want to be mean. And also, the problem is, if Lauren and Chapman are supposed to be the same age, they're both younger than 16. You know,
Right.
so I don't think anyone younger than 16 is really gonna have the, not calling them stupid, but like the brain capacity to understand I can betray these people for my own gain. You know, I don't feel like kids really think like that, like to that degree of like being in an unfamiliar environment, being surrounded by aliens, not knowing when you're coming back home. You're going to be scared if you're that young.
Right.
And you
right.
don't know when you're going to go back home, and everything around you is like, I have no control over this. What do I do? You know, it felt to me more like the actions of like an arrogant like 20-year-old, you know, who
Yes,
thinks
he
he
did read very
owns the
20-year-old.
world, right?
Right.
But it's also, like I said, it's just so one note. He's like boring. Like I didn't really care anything he did, because I'm like, well, it's just the same thing. He just has the same reaction every time. It's just like, oh, well, I just thought blah blah blah. Oh, you thought you were gonna. Well, I was just gonna blah blah blah. And I was just like, oh God.
I don't
Yeah.
even mind the again, like the snark of that. Like I don't mind that stuff.
Sure.
That I agree. It felt one note, but that to me is less consequential if that character can grow or learn from that place, just based on their experiences here. What does bug me is the shit of like, oh yeah, well, he doesn't know the code to be able to fly the ship, so he's not going to be able to fly the ship. Flies the ship, you know?
Yeah.
Like tries to sell Lauren into slavery to save his own ass. Like,
Yeah,
that's going out of your way to do something malicious and evil, to such an extent, again, where that's just point blank not the same person that
Yeah.
we got a glimpse of in book 2 of the Animorphs series.
Yeah,
period. Like,
it's
just
really
isn't.
not. I get it. People grow, people change, but it just, there's too many like fallacies in this for me to actually believe that like that's how he is.
Yeah, it was just because then it also just deprives any sort of sympathy that you could derive from book 2, which is and I did not really like book 2, if I recall. I liked it less than Invasion, but that to me is like the one thing about book 2 that was interesting was the sort of emotional sympathy that you can elicit from realizing that these people are trapped in their own minds. And any sympathy that you would have for this character goes right out the window the second you see him in this book.
Yep. Yeah.
So it just made an already lesser entry in the series, in my opinion, worse.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. But Lauren rocks. And
Lauren's
she's
cool.
completely of age to be sleeping with aliens.
By the end of this book, put an asterisk.
Yeah.
By the end of this book.
Almost immediately, Elfangor and her have a spark of something. She is very smart. She's quick-witted. She's quick on her feet. She has good ideas. She asks interesting questions that are, thought-provoking that Elfangor hasn't really considered. We also learn a little bit just about their language interpreter. It's on like a slight delay, but it works relatively quickly. And so that was kind of interesting to see how they adapt to that language very quickly. It's sort of MacGuffin-esque in the sense that it's just like, he just kind of says like, oh, my language interpreter needs a moment to process. And then, and then kind of...
Yeah.
But I don't mind it, because at least it acknowledges what could potentially be, obviously, a much more consequential flaw. But it also talks about, of course, how the telepathic speech is sort of communicable irrespective of any language, because of the way that it actually is articulated. It's all through thought and mind, so it's going to translate sort of regardless, which I thought was very interesting as well, because that's just something I hadn't really considered.
Yeah, me too.
But so they take these prisoners from the Skritnaw and deliver them back to the main ship.
Yep.
Question mark. And on that, Elfangor is basically expecting them to be shepherded back to their planet, but they'll go off. Him and Arbron are going to do their own thing, but they're almost immediately called back to the bridge to be assigned on their next mission, which is to go with Alaran, the war prince, but it's kind of implied to be
shifty. He's shifty.
I don't want to say forcibly retired, but he's on the way out.
Dishonorably discharged?
Yeah, he's like about to be. Yeah. That's kind of the implication, right? And so Alaran is going to be in charge, but the mission essentially is that the three of them are going to take the two back to Earth, wipe their memories, and sort of get back to, the mother base or whatever, right? So, obviously, in the face of a major war prince, the Elfangor and Arbron are like, oh my god, that's amazing, but this is a messenger mission. This is a nothing mission. This is pretty low on the totem pole of what they would like to be doing.
Yeah.
Especially with their admittedly good performance in getting the Skritnos ship in the first place.
Right.
So, I think you may have mentioned this. I don't know, but the Skritnos ship, one of them did get away.
Yes.
Which is kind of an important part of whatever the next.
And they
phase
said
of this is.
there is a thing called a time matrix on this ship. And they're like, yeah, we definitely sense that Andalite technology. You guys didn't get it. So we got to go follow this ship and get that time matrix. It could destroy the entire universe as we know it. So
yeah,
cool.
So if I recall correctly too, they didn't realize that it was the time matrix until Arbron is going through the logs, the data logs from the Skritnos ship, sees that it's definitely the time matrix, shows it to Alaran.
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
Alaran who really makes the decision, the call to be like, forget dropping these humans off.
We have
That
to
can
go
be
get the ship.
secondary. We need to go get this. Elfangor and Arbron are kind of on the back foot about this plan because their consideration is that's not really the mission directed.
Yep.
Shouldn't we just contact basically the people in charge? And also that seems like a far more important task. Let's just make sure that these humans get home first. They get outvoted obviously because Alaran is the war prince still and needs to be respected and whatnot. And we kind of get a little bit of loose backstory that's trickled out over the course of the next couple chapters, but I think that one of the biggest ones comes right around here. But ultimately, the totality of it is that Alaran is this disgraced, commander or whatever, because he was responsible, indirectly so, for two major things. One was he was the commander or prince or whatever you want to call him that lost the Hork-Bajir.
Yeah.
They were conquered by the Yeerks, and that was under Alaran's command. What we find out later is that Alaran had essentially commissioned, and I apologize because I'm blanking on the term that they call it, but basically commissioned a mass spread of a disease to try to eradicate the Yeerks.
The quantum virus.
Which is crazy. I mean, it's basically the equivalent of like if we were like, let's unleash COVID-19 times 10 on, X and X population just to try to win a war. Which is a massive war crime. Yep. The likes of which has only been seen probably by U.S. politics. But obviously was the major reason for Alaran's fall from grace, because put aside the fact that he's in charge when they lose this major planet and an entire species to the Yeerk people, he also has engaged in a massive war crime that has breached the moral and ethic code of the Animorph people. So
the Andalite people.
The Andalite, sorry, I don't know what happened today that my wires got crossed, because I was even Googling, I was like, why can't I find the book? And I had called it the Animorph Chronicles.
No.
I was like, what the hell? But yeah, I'm just, my brain's screwy.
No, yeah, so he tried to eradicate the Yeerks by doing this, which is, like, not cool. And still, it didn't work. So he's
He
kind of
advocates for it in an interesting way.
yeah, he
which
does.
Which I think brings the book closer to, I think, one of its more central themes that I do find to be a very interesting perspective on war that I think is surprisingly mature and grown up to be
Yeah.
introducing to the demographic that would be reading this book. But it comes with an interesting sort of moral quandary. How many lives are you comfortable in sacrificing in order to try to win?
But for the
a
greater
war?
good. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that, particularly when it comes to Alaran's decision, knowing that he lost in the face of also exposing people to a disease that
Yeah.
essentially caused a mass genocide,
Yeah.
or at least that was the intent, ultimately it wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
But
It didn't work.
Alaran's still steadfast in his belief that it was worth it because even a 1% chance to save somebody is better than sitting back on your heels and doing nothing. And war has to have a cost.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you just have to get comfortable with it.
He's essentially like, what did you expect me to do? What should I have done? I had to make a decision in this case, and I made a decision. Whether it was successful or not, I still stand by my decision that I made because I believed at the time it was the best thing that we could have done to try to help all the other races in the galaxy. Unfortunately, it did not work. So now he's kind of stuck. So that's kind of why we believe that he is going to be dishonorably discharged from the military Andalite service. So they ping this ship. They follow the Skritna ship that has the time matrix. They follow it to the Taxon planet. A lot of little Taxons like squiggling around. And Alaran's like, all right, everybody, we're going to morph Taxons. And they're like, oh my God, do we have to? And Alaran's like, yes. So let's knock out a Taxon. You guys acquire the DNA, and they all morph Taxons. And I love that they really describe in detail the absolute hunger that comes with being a Taxon, and how that's nearly impossible to escape from that hunger. They morph Taxons, they separate, they're gonna, I guess, look around the planet to find the ship.
Well, they very quickly get into a fight, and in the midst of this fight, Elfangor very badassly kicks the shit out of the Taxons that are getting the upper hand on both Arbron and Alaran. But after all this, it's a very taxing and very violent moment that Elfangor kind of snaps out of, and then he kind of breaks down. And he immediately seeks solace in Lauren, which I think is the real marker for their relationship, because they've had a few conversations at this point in the book, and it's very clear that there's some sort of spark there. They've also had conversations with Chapman in which it seems very clear to Elfangor that something is not right with this particular human, that he doesn't seem like a good representation of their species, that he's severely morally sort of bankrupt, I would go as far as to say, just in his general assessment. And Chapman in one of these conversations actually even makes a passing comment about, well, it seems like the Yeerks have the right idea. That doesn't seem like if you gave yourself over to the Yeerk, then there probably wouldn't be any sort of war or
which
anything
like
like
is
that.
such like backwards ass thinking, in my opinion. Like, I just don't find that realistic for anybody to think, oh, something that goes in my brain and controls me, oh yeah, there'd be no wars and everyone would be happy. Like, I just, that's very hard for me for someone to believe that someone would actually be okay with that.
It's dumb as fuck, but also I know for any teenager in the world, the one thing that you actually aspire for is just unimpeded freedom. So
Yeah.
I don't know why anyone would voluntarily even think that's remotely a good idea.
Yeah.
Most especially a teenager. But obviously Chapman is fucked in the head, and Elfangor recognizes that immediately. But it also propels him and Lauren to have some very explicit conversations about basically unpacking her code of ethics, the things that she likes about her planet. And it kind of really endears one to the other.
Yeah,
but I
they bond.
think that the real movement for that relationship is when Elfangor breaks down, because as you had said earlier, you were talking about how Elfangor makes it very clear that he doesn't quite experience emotions in the same way as humans do, but they are still there. And his experience in sort of breaking down to Lauren definitely kind of merges those two closer together.
Yeah.
In acknowledging that perhaps their quote-unquote human experience is not too dissimilar from one another.
Yeah, and I also thought this would have been a really good opportunity to start planting seeds of, like, Chapman seeing Elf hanging out with Lauren and just seeing them connect and, like, starting to get jealous over that. And then that could lead him into betraying them against the Yeerks. That would give him that motivation, because he's like, well, he's hanging out with her all the time. What's wrong with me? You know,
Right.
We could have had some kind of something like that, where, like, if he meets Elfangor the first time, he's like, wow, you're an alien, incredible, I love aliens, I think you're so cool, tell me everything. And Elf kind of ignores him and just sticks with Lauren. That would have given his character better motivation to betray them later on, but that's neither here nor there at this point. That was just, but, like, that, this was the point where they start really bonding together, that I was like, this would be, like, a good moment for that, giving Chapman some dynamic, something different. But
yeah, I agree. But Chapman is mostly left to the sidelines unless he's being outwardly antagonistic to Elfangor. So it is a point that I think is worth at least acknowledging. He comes back to his senses, returns to his friends, and they take these taxon bodies and investigate the planet. They realize very quickly that there's a massive sort of spaceport that the Yeerks are controlling on this planet, that actually leads Elfangor to the conclusion that, you know, he was under the impression that in schooling, from the training that they were doing, that they were definitely winning the war. This is the first time that he ever has a sort of crisis and understanding that he may have been wrong in that initial thought, because this seems massive, and it also has the implication that there are far more of these types of spaceports on other planets as well. So it's a pretty haunting sort of image. Shortly thereafter, there is they see the Taxons feeding and start to get the same sort of burst of hunger in themselves, which is going to be a through line through a lot of this sort of second third of the book.
They start rushing towards the body, unable to help themselves. Yeah. And at the last minute, right before Elfangor as a Taxon bites into this dead body, he pulls himself away, and he's like, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this. And he's able to pull himself away from it. And then some Hork-Bajir are like, that's weird. I've never seen a Taxon turn down a meal. Andalite bandit!
So immediately this one who is at this point Sub-Visser
7, I think.
Is that Sub-Visser 7 sounds right. But obviously, just in strictly the language, and shout out to Applegate and I'm not sure if
Michael Grant
also co-wrote this one.
He did.
But shout out to them, because the language is so specific now for Visser 3 that this is obviously him.
That's our boy.
He's and what I loved about this too is it also addresses one of my major complaints with the series, because I think they don't do this enough, is that they do not show the Yeerks actually being intelligent and getting a one-over on anybody. And what I loved about this is that he immediately sees that, puts two and two together, and it's like, well, you can't wait me out forever. I know that you're an Andalite, so just show me for real. Elfangor is, steadfast as he's being like sort of carted away here. He's like, no, I'm not going to give myself up. he does end up talking back to him, and he Visser, Sub-Visser 7 says, "You're gonna give me that Andalite body because I want to be the first Visser to have an Andalite body." So from the outset, we have Visser 3's major goal.
He's got that goal right there. Mm-hmm.
Is something that we know he achieves, which is also sad and unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
So,
we also, there was a little bit before they left the ship. They're talking to Alaran, and they find a back room on one of the ships that's full of like Yeerks, just like the Yeerk bodies and all that.
I forgot about this. Yes.
Yeah. And Alaran's like, Elfangor, you need to kill them all immediately right now. And Elfangor's like, I don't want to do that. They're innocent. Like, they're just floating around in their own bodies. Like, they're not in anybody's head.
Yeah, they're defenseless.
They're defenseless. And it wouldn't be right. You know, these we should take them as like prisoners, or we should like let them go, or figure out something else. And Alaran's like, this is a direct order. Like, I want you to destroy them and kill all of them. And Elfangor's like, no, I'm not going to. So there's a little rift there, and it does kind of bring up the theme again of like casualties in war. What is quote unquote fair and what is not fair? You know, like what is right for war and what is good for the greater common good. You know, so that
quick cue. Would you have done it?
It's hard because it's like, that's really difficult for me. Part of me, like, there's a part of my brain that goes like, well, yeah, obviously, because they enslave people. But, like, at the same time, because it's their nature, it's not their fault that that's what they have to do, you know?
Right.
So, I don't know. I think I would feel like if I was that young and listening to an adult, I think I would feel like I would have to. And, like, there wasn't any other option. I wouldn't feel good about it. But, like... Yeah. What about you?
So I go back and forth because I would say as an objective reader of the series and knowing the Yeerks, it's very easy for me to be like, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But putting myself in the shoes of and I would have to equate it to more human circumstances. So obviously, if we're at war with, I don't know, Russia or whatever, it's a very different context and connotation than we're at war with a slug species that goes inside your brain, right? So there's just something inherently in the sort of bias of the equation that is hard to relate to, because human to human, there's an understanding that, you know, even if you're from another country or something, it doesn't inherently make you evil.
Right.
But me knowing the Yeerks, I'm like, fuck them bitches. I'm like, send them out of the, you know what I mean? So it's very, so it's kind of almost hard to like totally relate to, and because of the alien nature of it. But if I'm relating it to human circumstances, I'm like, absolutely not. So I don't know. I'm kind of back and forth.
Yeah,
with
that's
it.
Really difficult. It's
interesting.
So they do that. They morph Taxons. The Hork-Bajir notice him. They're like, I'll get you, Andalite bandit. And then there's a fight, and Elfangor gets out,
so
right?
Elfangor hears him say that, you know, he wants an Andalite body. He's like, I don't care what you do with me, but you'll kill me before you ever get in this body.
That's right. Get him.
Get him. And he says like, all right, fair enough. And he throws him out to a bunch of Taxons.
Yeah.
They start to rip him apart.
Yeah. That's what happened.
And this was actually the first moment where, I already shouted out MacLeod Andrews enough, but this was the first moment where I was really like, oh, this guy rocks. 'Cause this moment, when he's reading this shit, I was like, this is what he literally is going through it with like the yells that Elfangor is doing, and like the telling himself to demorph. He's like actually shouts it almost.
Yeah. Like
crazy. He does demorph just in time and like slicing through, and he gets out and barely makes his big escape. There's like a chase sequence.
Yeah.
It's this whole elaborate thing, but he does get away. He tries to get back to the ship. It's at this point that
he's separated from
somehow,
everybody. Yeah. He's not sure where he's going. He gets back to the ship, and I think
to discover
the Skrit-Na ship, right?
and ends up seeing that Lauren has been now is basically like about to be sold by Chapman.
Yeah.
To,
We're just like,
to slavery. He's like negotiating with the Yeerks or some shit like that.
Bro, what the heck? Like, I thought you were on our side. I guess not, you know? Like, okay. Cool. Thanks, Chapman.
Obviously, this goes south. Yeah. But I'm blanking on how Elfangor gets the upper hand. I can't remember exactly. He like just but I remember he obviously is able to, you know, get rid of these guys, but I'm blanking on this particular spot in the story.
Yeah, I skipped a bit in my notes, I think, but essentially he rescues Lauren and gets Chapman away from the Hork-Bajir. They get out. Mm-hmm. I think they were... did they get on a train? There's a point where he's on a train. Oh, man.
I thought he was on the train with Subvisor 7.
Yeah.
But maybe I misread.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. He gets out. He gets away. Oh, yeah, Chapman brought the ship over, wants to trade planet Earth with the Yeerks. That's kind of where, like, the first book, like, ends. Is kind of, like, on this cliffhanger of, like, Chapman's betraying us. He's going to sell out planet Earth, give it to the Yeerks, and all that. And then I stopped taking notes until Elfangor meets with Arbron. I think
no, but that doesn't happen that far after.
No, I don't think so.
Because Arbron basically, for all intents and purposes, and maybe we'll remember as we keep going here, but for all intents and purposes, Elfangor, you know, kind of reclaims the upper hand. They have this Skritna ship, and Arbron approaches. Is still in Taxon form. And man, it's at this point, sad. Or shortly thereafter, that it's revealed that he's stuck. They have a term for it actually now as well, which Nothlit, which is essentially what has also happened to Timaeus.
Translated to not lit, because it's not a lit time for Arbron to be trapped in a Taxon morph. Does anybody say that anymore? I don't think anybody says that anymore. I don't think anybody says lit anymore.
I say a lot of things ironically now.
Yeah.
I've started bringing back banger.
Yeah.
I've started bringing back baller, which has been a fun one to really unpack again. Give it a couple weeks. I'll probably bring back dope. I already say that. A lot. It's dope as hell, man. I already do 6, so...
we're old, so, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, Arbron is trapped in the Taxon morph, start of book 2, and Elfangor's like, no! And Arbron's like, kill me! And Elfangor's like, I don't wanna, buddy! We gotta stick together! And Arbron's like, I hate my life! And he attacks Elfangor, tries to get Elfangor to, like, kill him, and Elfangor is like, I don't want to kill you, I don't want to hurt you. They're in the ship, and Elfangor blows a hole in the side of the ship, and the ship crashes. I think they were, like, flying away, and Arbron was controlling the ship, and then, let me see, the ship crashes, Elfangor wakes up, he's by himself. Arbron is nowhere to be seen. And he thinks that he sees the time matrix. He thinks Arbron was taken by Taxons after they crashed. They were separated. He's just by himself. He finds the Skritna ship. There's a convertible Mustang in the ship. Didn't realize the ship was that big.
Maybe I missed it, but how the hell does he drive this thing with four legs?
I don't know how I think he had to like adjust the seat. Yeah, I don't know how his centaur body sits in the seat, but he figures it out.
Yeah, he stuffs himself in this thing, and he loves it so much. He actually talks about it for the whole rest of the book. He's like, I've been in faster things before, but there's nothing quite like the fucking breeze of a Mustang.
Playing the Rolling Stones.
Which is like, all right, cool. So yeah, he's cooking after him. He's trying to find where the Taxons took him. He ends up uncovering essentially this hideout of Taxons, that is manned by the... Sorry, my dog is drinking water right next to me, so if you hear any sort of slurping sound, that's what it is.
No, it's okay.
So, which is essentially manned by, like, the head Taxon of whatever Taxon Mountain. And it's at this point that we find out...
Yeah.
Yes, the Living Hive. Thank you
very much.
The Living Hive. So they are basically a rebel alliance of Taxons who did not submit to the Yeerks, which is crazy that there's an entire bit of this species that because we were led to believe that all Taxons were under control of the Yeerks. That's apparently not true. And this rebel faction wants nothing more than to basically reclaim their planet. We also find out other things like they are able to maneuver throughout their planet through these sort of tunnels that are also like kind of propel through like some sort of wind turbine that's not really like...
It's like when you drive up to the bank and they give you that tube to like put your bank paperwork in, and then you put the tube in the machine and it just gets sucked in. Yeah. It's like that.
So they're just zooming around the planet.
Slurp.
And Arbron and Elfangor are sort of reunited, and it's at this point that Elfangor uses Arbron to basically convince the hive mind that they have the same goals here. So why can't they collaborate?
Let's go get them!
And basically attack this giant spaceport so that they could try to get Alaran back, because they're not really sure where Alaran is.
Exactly.
So they zoom in there. Arbron is saying a lot of things like he's gonna die or something. He's basically like, hey man, like I'm letting you know die. The hunger is pretty bad, and and we already know that I'm suicidal.
So maybe something bad is gonna happen. Who knows?
Yeah, he's like, hey, you're not really gonna be able to tell the difference between the good Taxons and the bad ones, so don't hesitate.
Just kill.
Yeah.
And I think at this point we can put a pause on this episode since they're about to get into the big battle. This might be a good pausing point for this episode, and we'll continue it on in the next episode. Ooh. So if you want to tune in to the next episode, see what happens. Oh my God. Action, romance, and escape to Earth. Oh my God. So if you want to tune in next week's episode, you absolutely should. If you want to email us about any of your thoughts on this episode, you should email us at morphinbuddies@gmail.com. That's morphinbuddies @gmail.com. Sometimes I spell it too fast and I trip up on my letters, and then I get confused what letter I'm on, and if I missed a letter, I'm neurotic. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. So you are welcome to email us, and we will see you guys on the next episode of Morphin Buddies.